and it's Damascus, more than any other Arab city, that's been the center of Arab nationalism.
The Syrian Crisis of 1957. The Syrian Crisis of 1957 was a period of severe diplomatic confrontations during the Cold War that involved Syria and the Soviet Union on one hand, and the United States and its allies including Turkey and the Baghdad Pact on the other. Tensions began on the 18th of August when the Syrian government, presided by Shukri al-Quwatli, made a series of provocative institutional changes, such as the appointment of Colonel Afrin al-Bazari as the Chief of Staff of the Syrian Army, who was alleged by Western governments to be a Soviet sympathizer or simp. Suspicions that a communist takeover had occurred in Damascus grew larger, prompting neighboring Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon to consider supporting an Arab or even a Western military intervention to overthrow the Syrian government. Turkey was the only country to step in by deploying thousands of troops along the Syrian-Turkish border. Nikita Khrushchev threatened that he would launch missiles at Turkey if it attacked Syria, while the United States said that it could attack the Soviet Union in response to an assault on Turkey. The crisis ended in late October when Turkey agreed to cease its border operations following pressure by the United States, and when Khrushchev made an unexpected visit to the Turkish embassy in Moscow. The events are widely seen as a major failure of the Eisenhower Doctrine, which stressed that the United States could intervene militarily on behalf of a Middle Eastern ally to fight international communism. Now, the events, we're going to backtrack here, but we're going to read a telegram quickly here. Time approaching, if indeed not already arrived, when Syria will cease to be effectively an independent nation, but will have been taken over, as was Czechoslovakia in 1948, and made into a Soviet satellite, having independence only in name, and will not have, and not in substance. We are also convinced that once present groups now in control Damascus has consolidated its position in Syria, it will reach out in efforts to subvert surrounding countries, thus propagating communist virus and paving way for control by elements subservient to Moscow. I don't know who wrote this telegraph or if the telegraph limiter has limits or whatever, but I guess it's supposed to be pretty much quick note stuff. But telegram from the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia to the State Department, 1956. Now, the crisis began in mid-August when the Syrian government made a series of important moves, furthering the idea that communists were in control of Damascus. Such changes including the replacement of Tawfiq Nazim al-Din by Colonel Afrin al-Baziri as Chief of Staff of the Syrian Army. The latter was suspected by Western governments to be a pro-Soviet fellow traveler or simp. This came 4 days after the Syrians expelled 3 American diplomats who were accused by Damascus of plotting to overthrow the government. Who knows? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? President Dwight D. Eisenhower's special envoy to the Middle East, James P. Richard, warned about moving too fast and believed that the tensions could change character and ease off in a few days or weeks now, following Anglo-American talks in response to the incident. U.S. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles described the situation as totally unacceptable and called for further efforts to prevent Syria from becoming a Soviet satellite. He had hope, however, that a violent response to the developments would be prevented, especially by Israel. On the 21st of August, as advised by Dulles, Eisenhower made unclear statements on the events during a press conference, without alleging that the Syrian government was communist controlled. Syria responded with another press conference 2 days later, stating that Damascus was committed to positive neutralism, a foreign policy doctrine that stressed independence from the imperialism of the Cold War superpowers. By the end of August, both Washington and London were convinced that Syria was no longer in the non-aligned camp, and that something had to be done in order to prevent the subverting of neighboring countries to communism. In a letter to Dulles on the 28th of August, British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan described Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev as a more dangerous man even than Stalin, and further stressed the importance of taking action so that neighboring Lebanon, Jordan, and eventually Iraq did not fall under Soviet spheres of influence, even though most of them will during the Cold War. But the same day, British Ambassador to Jordan, Sir Charles Johnston, said that the Jordanian government was aware of anti-government cells within Syria that it considered arming, but then gave up on the idea and decided to wait for further developments of the crisis. At the end of the month, Eisenhower sent Lloyd W. Henderson as a special envoy to the Middle East, who would work out a solution to the crisis by consulting different involving governments, all except the Syrian government, because the Syrian government would do stuff like complain and say that they're not communists and stuff like that. So, waste of time to involve Syria. On the 2nd of September, Secretary Dole said during a press conference in Washington that all of the countries bordering Syria were of the opinion that Syria would become a communist state if nothing was to be done within the next 60 days. This came after Henderson delivered Eisenhower a report from his visit to the Middle East. It also followed a series of important diplomatic exchanges between officials from different countries, during which it was revealed that Israel was willing to take military action unless other countries neighboring Syria decided to seal off the country, which was discussed in the beginning of September during the meeting in Ankara between the Turkish Prime Minister Enad Mercedes, Iraqi Crown Prince Abd al-Il, and the American ambassador to Turkey, John Doe. Israel was eventually pressured by the West to show restraint and not react or even act. Abd al-Il was still cautious, as he wanted to consult Jordan first before making any moves. A penetration of Syrian territory through Jordan appeared like an easier plan to him than through the Iraqi-Syrian border. Turkey, however, was willing to adopt military measures, as it viewed the situation as a matter of national security, and for those reasons as well, we will talk about that later. But with that being said, as we can see, the Cold War is not really a vacuum. But anyway, ladies, gentlemen, and MB, thank you for watching this video to the very end. It was a bit tight, it was a bit strenuous, but I think we made it. But I think anyway, wait, okay, hold on. Alright, so basically, great video. As you can see, the Cold War is not really in a vacuum. As you can see, that's kind of led to the ICBMs being deployed in Turkey, which then went on to influence the Soviets to put missiles in Cuba, making it like 1 minute to midnight, like 20 seconds to midnight in 1962. So with that being said, the Syrian crisis basically almost destroyed the world and stuff like that. But with that being said, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and I hope it was entertaining. And there's history's not a flat circle. History is actually very varied, and one event could alter the course of history forever. So kind of a butterfly effect, if you ask me, and this is one of the many butterfly effects. Something that might not seem too significant on the surface, but that butterfly could have pollinated a plant that gives human life and stuff like that. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and until next time, learn something. No more 10-minute videos unless it's super long. Sanitize, stay safe, learn something. Bye bye.